Intellectual property is proudly brought to you by Adams & Adams, rooted in 100 years of excellence in intellectual property law.
Good evening and welcome to the IP Show. Last week I spoke with two gentlemen regarding the impact of the developing biotech sector on the management of intellectual property. We'll continue with that topic tonight to discuss the specifics of new legislation impacting on those doing business in this sector. I'm joined in the studio again by William Modisakeng from Adams & Adams, and with him Dr Joe Molete, CEO of BioPAD. Good evening, gentlemen.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Joe, starting off with you, what is BioPAD and what is your mandate with regards to the biotech sector?
Well, BioPAD is a trust initiated by the Department of Science and Technology, and our mandate really is to grow the biotech industry in South Africa.
And has it grown? Are you seeing that growth?
Well, it is growing. Of course, it's a new industry. We have a number of challenges that we're dealing through, but there's been some progress in the last 4 years or so.
I'm glad to hear that. William, from your point of view, last time we spoke about the different motivations for IP management, and if you're in the biotech business, what should you consider and so forth. But let's get more specific. If you have to think about different laws that's being introduced and so forth, what do I need to consider if I'm in the biotech business?
Well, the last time we spoke, we made reference to a couple of things. We spoke about developments, legal developments. We referred to the Biodiversity Act, which is now in force as on the 1st of April.
What does the Biodiversity Act say?
Mainly the Biodiversity Act is an act that is provided by a government to protect our natural resources, but also at the same time providing means for protecting traditional knowledge that is used to initiate or to support development of biotech products.
And of course that is critical. I mean, one of the key things if we talk about our biotech sector, we always talk about this biodiversity. That's a key issue that we have a competitive edge in terms of the rest of the world. So we have to protect that, and that's the intention behind the Biodiversity Act. That's
exactly our intention with the Biodiversity Act. There's been laments about the Biodiversity Act having negative impact on research, in that now it's putting a burden on researchers to comply with certain requirements even before they can begin with their research. And there are certain things they need to get a permit, for instance, to do bioprospecting. So it requires more from the side of researchers, but we hope that it will not have a negative impact to stifle research and actually stop people from thinking of doing biotech research and going to other countries.
But I mean, if I want to set up a shop on the corner, I can't just do that. I've got to get some kind of permit to do that as well. So this is just bringing biotech into the mainstream of economic activity.
Yes. Okay. I think it's important that the act itself be demystified. You know, there are certain things that people think, and I think only yesterday there was a workshop where people were talking about demystifying the act.
That's right.
And it's very important. That's one of the things that we do. We give advice on how to comply with the act, what is required at what time.
Okay, before we go to the other introductions, new legislation, Joe, from your point of view, the Biodiversity Act, how do you see that impacting on your industry?
I think all the acts that are coming up is just a sign to show that the industry is growing, and we need to do something to protect and to make sure that people know which channels to follow. And also the fact that in the past, I think we've seen people come in bioprospect in our country, and we just need to make sure that, you know, whatever is in South Africa stays in South Africa and
that the benefits accrue to South Africans.
Definitely, that's what we are all about here.
You mentioned also the Indigenous Knowledge Act, or IKS, from the Department of Trade and Industry last time.
The act is mainly to protect the use of indigenous knowledge, but not only to protect it, but to protect it using modern IP protection means. Okay. For instance, already we have the Patents Amendment Act, which I did talk about last time, which is a requirement in when applying for a patent that you need to declare that you either you used or you did not use South African biodiversity material. But there's also now suggested amendments into the Designs Act, where you'll have not only functional and aesthetic designs, but you'll also have traditional designs. It also speaks to the use of geographic indicators which are linked to traditional knowledge.
So if you think about, I think the one thing that comes to mind that most people would recognize is The Lion Sleeps Tonight, the Disney song, and saying, but that's something that came from rural South Africa.
Yes.
And why don't we benefit from the use of that? Okay. Outside of those three areas, we've mentioned the Biodiversity Act, the Indigenous Knowledge, and then the Patent Amendments Act. Are there other...
I think these are the main ones that one should concentrate on now. There's another, the GMO Act, Genetically Modified Organisms Act, in terms of which certain things need to be complied with to introduce genetically modified organisms into the country. Okay. Amongst some of those which is creating a stir is the requirement for what we call impact assessments. And it's causing a big stir. There's been a couple of amendments to the Act, I think, already, and which are lying on my desk and they need to be looked at.
Joe, from your point of view?
I think the other one that's more important is the intellectual property rights for publicly financed research. Okay. I think there was also a workshop yesterday that we attended. And again, the point of this Act is also to make sure that the intellectual property that accrues from the research funded by government money benefits South Africa.
Now, if I consider all this new legislation, I'm an entrepreneur. Entrepreneurship's already as difficult as it is in biotech, even more so. How do your organization, BioPAD, and elsewhere in government assist entrepreneurs in making sense of all these new introductions and navigating a course through it?
I think our organization is playing a critical role because we find ourselves in the middle. Because on one hand, we are accountable to the government. They give us money to grow the industry, so we finance a lot of entrepreneurs. On the other side, there are a lot of entrepreneurs who bring business plans, and they have a lot of challenges that we see. So one thing that we're trying to do as BioPAD is really to put mechanisms in place to support the entrepreneurs. In the past, we were merely viewed as funders. People approached us when they needed money, but we're saying that needs to change. So now we deal with entrepreneurs, we are more involved in the businesses, and we helping them. And
in that process, I would imagine you also influence government policy and the rollout of these very acts.
Most definitely.
Joe, as a very last question to you, I know that BioPAD will also be hosting the Bio2Biz conference later this year. Just tell us briefly about that.
A critical point. Bio2Biz is a conference that is hosted by the innovation centers that are in South Africa, and the purpose of it is really to inform the public. We get academic people, we get government people, business people together to make sure that they can share and exchange ideas of what's happening in the biotech industry.
It's a must attend if you're in the biotech sector.
It's an annual conference. It's happening on the 15th to the 17th of September right here in Sandton Convention Center.
Thank you very much, Joe. Thank you very much, William, for joining me again in the studio tonight.
Thank you.
That's all we have time for on the Intellectual Property Show this week. See you again next week. From me, Stefan Lamprecht. Good evening.
Intellectual Property was proudly brought to you by Adams & Adams, rooted in 100 years of excellence in intellectual property law.